wicked, wicked. Jungle is massive. Wicked, wicked. Wicked, wicked. Jungle is massive. Wicked, yo, 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 yo. Tell them how we got this skill.
Hello everyone and welcome to Claret and Booze. My name's Nick and this is my daily ramble. Right, well, it's been a while since we've done a few shows. Not that long. I mean, we did a show last weekend. We had a weekend off this weekend. But we will come back. We will be doing a few live shows as well as things do start to hopefully hot up in the transfer window and whatever else is happening at the club at the moment. There's plenty going on, isn't there? Let's face it. But before we get into it, as always, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Hit that bell notification icon and drop a like on the video because it does really help us. Now, look, as I've said before on previous shows, we will cover transfers. We will. But as it stands at the moment, I don't believe that there is any point really going into any depth. I know we're linked with loads of players. There's countless players that we're linked with. We're seeing the same names banded about over and over again. You know, Calvin Phillips, James Ward-Prowse, Armando Broja, to name a few. There's loads. And we get linked with the same names in every window. But normally I would cover them anyway. I would. But this season, if the story's being released by the club to their favoured news sites is to be believed, we're expecting the appointment of a director of football in the coming days, you know, and the front runner is Tim Steedman. I think that's how you pronounce his name. The chap who came through Werder Bremen and Leverkusen. Very, very, very impressive CV that guy's got. I'll be very excited. I think I wasn't excited about the transfer window for obvious reasons because we're more worried about players going out than coming in. But if we get this guy in place, then yeah, excitement will start to build a little bit in terms of player procurement. And at least us having a bit of a strategy to what we're doing going forwards. So that's good. That's good. So if Tim Steedman is going to come in, he is going to be our new director of football, and he is going to be announced in the next few days. And I think we're going to have something. We're going to have something to look forward to. In terms of budget, no one really knows. I mean, you've got to expect. Look, we're going to get the money from Declan Rice when he does eventually go to reinvest in the squad. There will be other money there as well. But what that budget is, none of us know. Now, I think that the board have done this arse about face with Declan Rice anyway, because as we're seeing, you know, one of the links, you know, Paulinho from Fulham, you know, they're wanting 50 million, 60 million for him. And the reason for that is because everybody knows that we've got a windfall coming with Declan Rice. You know, Sullivan came out the day after the conference final. We're going to sell him, and we're not going to accept a penny less than 120 million. Now, what that does is everybody's going to know that we've got money to spend, substantial money to spend, because on top of that 120 million, we've got our pot from last year as well. So you're probably going to be looking between 150 to 200 million, irrespective of what the board is saying, because that is what we do need to spend to fill the void that Declan Rice and others will leave if it goes as people are saying. But like I say, we won't cover them all at the moment. I think it is pointless. I think it would be mad for them to sanction any deals coming in or going out at the moment until this director of football is in place. You know, you don't bring a director of football in halfway through. This is a project in itself. We're bringing this guy in to fulfil that project. You know, we can't really leave it in the hands of David Moyes, even if we wanted to, because he's only got 12 months left of his contract, and he's going to have a short-sighted view. He's not going to be looking at the long term, is he? Because he's not here for the long term. So it's a good thing to get this guy in. It really is. But what we will touch on are some of the stories that are coming out. First of all, you know, Declan Rice. Now, obviously, Sullivan has linked to his favoured sources to generate interest and to probably push Arsenal into increasing their bid, that Man City and Chelsea and others are going to be making bids for the player. But what it's basically been leaked that we're not expecting those bids at all from those clubs because Declan Rice's camp have informed these clubs, Liverpool, Man City, Man United, Chelsea, that he only wants to join Arsenal. Therefore, don't waste your time. Which means that the ball is firmly in Arsenal's court, and they know this. They know it. So the frustrating thing is that we're going to be playing this game by the looks of it for quite some time. I was hoping, if it's going to happen, I was hoping to get it done quickly because I don't think we're going to forward fund, which would be the right thing to do, is to forward fund our transfer window so that we can maximise the value on players that we get in. You know, any chairman with half a brain wouldn't have come out and did what Sullivan did. You know, you wouldn't go and wave a flag and say, look how much money we're going to have in a little while when you've got a big rebuild that's coming. You know, if anything, you would have come out and been coy. You'd have done their Declan Rice stuff behind the scenes, but tried to do what Aston Villa did with Grealish. They spent the Grealish money before they sold Grealish. That's what they did. And when you do that, you know, you've got more negotiating power because you can plead poverty a little bit more, I suppose. You know, but the way that Sullivan's done it, you know, nobody's going to be accepting. Why would anyone accept a lower cost for a player for us when we're playing hardball with Declan Rice and they know that the amount of money that we're going to get in? So really what we should have been doing is, with Declan Rice, is probably keeping him until later in the window, anyway, whatever happens, and getting all of our business done before he goes out, just for the sole purpose of not getting our pants pulled down over players, you know. Everyone's going to have a premium now, whoever you go for. You can probably add 10, 20 million to a deal. So it does seem a little bit bonkers that we're going to be negotiating from 80 to 90 million upwards to 100. But in doing so publicly the way that we are, we're going to be paying more for the players that we're going to be buying. It just seems a little bit mad the way that we do things. But we never do things simply, do we? It just doesn't happen. That's very much a West Ham way. But with this thing with Rice, look, I love Declan Rice, I do. And I appreciate there might have been a gentleman's agreement there, but for him to go out and feel like he can just go, right, I'm going to Arsenal, that's where I'm going. The gentleman's agreement should be, we'll let you leave if you want to leave. Not that you can cherry pick the club that you're going to, irrespective of how much money they are willing to pay us for you. You know, if it's below our market value, I'm sure that wasn't part of any gentleman's agreement. It wouldn't have been. So that being the case, if Declan Rice's camp have done that, if the rumours are to be believed, then it's wrong. It's completely wrong. And I personally would be in favour of cutting our noses off to spite our faces, but it's not my money. But I would, you know, I think if other clubs do come in and bid and we accept those bids and Declan Rice refuses to go to them because he's got his heart set on Arsenal because he doesn't want to move outside of London, then as far as I'm concerned, that would be, well, that's not my problem. You either want to stay or you want to go. If you want to go to a club, then you want to convince them to pay the money that we're asking. It's as simple as that. But it looks like that Declan Rice and his camp have positioned Arsenal. They're in a position of power now, which they probably wouldn't have been. We wanted a situation. I think that's why Sullivan came out and did what he did, because he's trying to provoke a bidding war. But it looks like the Rice camp have mitigated that by going out to the clubs that would be approaching him and saying, there's no point bidding, we're going to come to you. So, yeah, there's some politics going on behind the scenes. It's leaving a bit of a bad taste in the mouth. But look, we'll have to wait until that plays out before we cast final judgment, because we just don't know. None of us really know. There's tons and tons of rumours. But, yeah, we shall see. The other one is Gianluca Scamacca. This is another ongoing saga. We all know that, you know, Scamacca, it was confirmed that if David Moyes stayed, Scamacca would be going. And so it's proved in terms of the fact that Scamacca does want to leave. I don't think he's handed in a transfer request yet. I don't think he'll be averse to doing that, because I think he wants to go. Roma have apparently agreed terms with him. I don't know how that works when we haven't accepted a bid, but they've apparently agreed terms. So personal terms are agreed. They're trying to get a deal over the line for a loan move, but a loan move that West Ham will not entertain. So we will not, and we've told all of these clubs, there's quite a few in Italy that want him, that we won't entertain a loan move. In fact, the only way that we will entertain a loan move is if it's with an obligation to buy, which will end up costing these clubs more money in the long run, because we will not take a hit on Scamacca. You know, we don't think he's depreciated. I don't think he has. I know he had an injury, but on the whole, for his first season in English football, playing in a very difficult setup, which wasn't great for him, I think he did all right. I think he did well, and I think he would do better next year if we kept him, which is a frustrating thing. But yeah, that's the long and short of it. We're not accepting. We want to get our money back. We would prefer it up front because we've got a big spending spree to do this summer. So as much money as we can get in now would be great. I think we'd be willing to sell him for what we bought him for, 35 million, something like that. I think we'd sell him. But if it's a loan, then the loan would cost the club that were buying him more money in the long run. So it's almost like they're spreading their payments. So the rumour is that if a club wanted to buy, there'd be a big loan. Wanted to loan, there would be a big loan fee followed by an obligation to buy, which would take it beyond the 35 million. So we're pushing clubs to buy him as opposed to trying to loan him. The only issue that we've got is these Italian clubs that are interested in him, they don't have the money required to spend 35 million on a Scamacca. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. It's another one, the player might want to go, but unless we get the money that we want for him, I think it looks like we're past getting stung on players. I'll believe it when I see it. I mean, we're a terrible selling club, aren't we? You've only got to look at this debacle with Vlasic at the moment, who is currently without a club. He's due to be back at West Ham. His obligation to buy for 13 million for Torino wasn't activated. They know the player wants to stay there, that he doesn't want to come back. The player wants to stay in Italy, but Torino weren't willing to pay 13 million for him. They let that clause expire, and they're so sure that they will get this player that they want to get him for under 10 million after we paid 30 million plus for him a couple of years ago for a number 10 that we never played in the number 10 position, which is bonkers, isn't it? It is bonkers. It's crazy. As we know, Manuel Lanzini is moving on as well. So players in similar positions, you might think that Vlasic could fill that void. But then when you look at the amount of game time that Lanzini got last year, would you want to take Lanzini's position on the bench? I don't think that's a big selling point for anyone, is it? So I'm pretty certain that after the experience that Vlasic had in his spell with us, he probably does want to go. But again, it comes down to clubs have got to buy them. They've got to buy them. They're all earning big money, these guys as well. So are they going to want to take a financial hit themselves to move? We'll have to wait and see. In terms of other players that are going out, look, we know that Ben Johnson, they would like to move on. They're not in any desperate hurry to sell him because he's got a decent amount of time on his contract. They activated the 2-year clause. There's rumours that Fornals has requested to leave. Whether or not he'll get granted that, I don't know. Whether or not it's true, I don't know. But that's a rumour. I mean, we saw how unhappy Fornals was last year. He was in tears a couple of times when he came on. We know he loves the club. We do. But he looks like a guy that needs to be playing. It affects him deeply. So I think unless David Moyes can guarantee him some game time this year, we're just going to have another very unhappy Pablo Fornals, which isn't right. I think he's too good to be a bench player. And he doesn't want to be a bench player either. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. You would like to think that his game time, his chances of game time will have increased with the exit of Lanzini. But again, neither player really, they were both bit part players last year, weren't they? The other one, the strange one, is Ben Rama. There's rumours that Ben Rama's going to be leaving, which is mad. He's only just come into form. Now, I can only imagine that this is player driven, not club driven. Because why would we choose to sell Ben Rama now when we've had him for quite a few years and he's only just clicked into gear? That wouldn't be the case. So I can only imagine that the player has either requested or is pushing for a move. And with us being linked with the likes of Harvey Barnes, who with our transfer strategy of not buying anyone until we sell players, we'll probably miss out on anyway. That's what's going to happen. The longer we leave it. If we are genuinely interested in Harvey Barnes, which again, don't know because it's director of football thing, you're gonna miss out on these key targets if you're gonna drag your heels in the window. But I'm not gonna moan about it. It's what we do every window. I'm not expecting us to do anything really. There's 70 odd days left in the window. No one seems hurried. No one seems bothered. It's a big rebuild that's required. But we're going to be patient. We are going to start reporting on things when it hots up. Of course we are. But yeah, I mean, we don't know whether things are going to be held up or hindered by other rumours that are circulating. I'm sure you've seen them all in relation to David Sullivan. So there's a Sun article that was released yesterday. I'm not going to talk about it on here because it's a dangerous topic, but I'm sure you've seen what that is all about. Now, again, there's nothing to clarify or confirm that it is David Sullivan, but you know, we've all seen the pictures as well, and yeah, it's a tricky situation. If it does turn out to be the bloke that was in the porn industry, you know, he was a porn baron a couple of decades ago, so wouldn't be a surprise, would it? But again, it might not be. We might just be putting two and two together. He might have been in court for a parking ticket. Who knows? Who knows? Very coincidental though. But yeah, hopefully not, because you can only imagine if something like that happens, that's going to hinder us. You know, I mean, this guy Tim Steedman coming in. You think if a scandal like that breaks, surely, that's going to affect our ability to do business with people that have got a conscience, with people that want to work for respectable organisations. Yeah, it could make things more tricky for us, you know. But like I say, I don't really want to talk too much about that because it is a dangerous topic, and yeah, we'll wait and see how that pans out in the coming weeks and months, because I'm sure there's going to be loads more on that. Like I say, we might be wide of the mark. It could just be stuff that's been circulated on social media, and it might not even be our man. It might not be, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. It would be very West Ham like though, wouldn't it? And yeah, like I say, with regards to those stories and Scamacca, what I'm going to leave you with is some WhatsApp conversations that we've had in the group. So we've had WhatsApp conversations on Scamacca. So I'm going to close the show and leave you with those if you want to listen to them. So it's basically myself, Gary, and Dodsey. Oh, I think Nigel makes an appearance in there. My head must be shrinking. These headphones are falling off. But yeah, so if you want to have a little listen to that, it's quite an interesting debate. And right at the end of the show as well, we go on to talk about our a bit of a dream team thing. So there's another WhatsApp conversation about our a dream team between the probably the Lanzini era. It was inspired by the West Ham video that Ginge did with Lanzini, where Lanzini sort of spoke about his all-time West Ham 11. And it kind of triggered us to do the same thing, and we speak about, you know, how well would that team do nowadays, or indeed back in 2015-16, you know, would they have won the league? You know, it's good. It was an interesting one. It was nice to talk about something different and fantasise rather than talk about all the drama and the trepidation that's going on at the moment with the transfer window. It's players leaving that bothers me. You know, a lot of the players that are linked with leaving, they might not go. But for me, that's kind of heart and soul stuff, you know, not just Declan Rice, but Lanzini, Fornells. They're talking about Antonio as well. Scamacca's new, and so is Ings. But these are all players that, I don't know, it's a big rebuild if we lose all them. We can't lose all three of our strikers, can we? But I suppose we can. But yeah, we shall wait and see. So look, I'm going to leave you with now. This is a conversation on WhatsApp that was triggered by John, and then following that, we go on to talk about our dream team. All right, so I will speak to you soon. Thank you very much, and Kevin, you ads.
I know a lot of people will go, well, I haven't seen much of him. He don't look that great and all that, but as much as I think a player should stay and fight and not give up, regarding Scamacca, if we lose him, if we sell him, I think it's just ridiculous. I mean, you know, Antonio's, you know, getting on a bit. Some say he's leaving anyway. So what are we going to be left with? Danny Ings? I mean, Moyes will have to have a complete overhaul of the way he plays, let alone the squad, in order for Danny Ings or us to get the best out of Danny Ings. So to lose Scamacca would be so frustrating. There's definitely a player in there, 100%. And it just stinks, doesn't it, really? I mean, when's the last time we had a decent striker? Really, a proper striker? I mean, I can't remember the amount of strikers we've gone through under Sully's ownership. Some absolute dross, but he's not dross. And I think we've got to say to him, no, look, we need you to stay. Give it one more go. But it's just fucking frustrating, isn't it, really?
I think sometimes, though, John, when you know, when the bridges have been burnt, like with Haller, that he reached a point where he just weren't gonna put in a shift for West Ham anymore. That much was clear, and we all knew that Haller was a decent striker underneath it all, didn't we? We know that Scamacca's a decent striker. I think he's got to the point now where he is frustrated as hell. He has not progressed. I know he's had injuries and stuff like that, but even so, even before he had injuries, he was being played in a system that didn't suit him. He kind of flourished more in Europe than he did in the Premier League, but that was only because of the way he played. And this feeds into what Antonio said about feeding off scraps. So Danny Ings can't do it. Scamacca can't. Antonio can, but he's going. So it leaves us with no strikers. So he's got to either find a different way of playing that accommodates a different type of striker, or he's got to go and buy someone that can play the Antonio role. I think that's his only two choices.
No, I'm not too sure, Gary. I think he's only been here a year. He's had a turbulent time. He's come over to a new country. We know what the Italians are like. They're emotional. I think if we was to have made him feel like he was worth it, then, do you know what I mean? Really put an arm around him, really made him feel wanted and said, look, we're going to be building this team around you. We're going to make you a star. We are, you know. This is a Premier League. It is the biggest stage in the world. If you do want to go back to Italy at some point, you can, but don't leave now. This is, you know, this doing well in England is going to look better than doing well in your own country. With all due respect, you know, you're in a great club. I know we haven't played the way to suit you. You know, I'm sorry about that, but I don't want to give up. I want you to be front and centre of what we're doing, and you know, we want to make you the best that you can be. That's the type of thing. But it seems like what's happened is he's been shunned. I think Moyes is happy to have problems out of his reach. People that are on the bench not pushing him for starts. He doesn't want it. He can't be arsed with it. And he's happy to just get rid of problems because he doesn't want to have to change his style. But as John said, if we just keep Danny Ings, we're going to have to change our style to accommodate him anyway. Scamacca's better. All you need with Scamacca could work in our system as well. You could change him. You could drop him to a bit of a deep line forward, and you could just make sure you've got pace and power around him. You know, running off of him, he can be the link-up player. It could work. He's a tremendous player. I think it's a lost opportunity, and I think it's what it means as well. You know, for us to keep on fucking around and messing these players up. You know, the next striker that we try to sign, if they've got half a brain, they won't go near David Moyes with a barge pole. They won't.
I mean, Kevin Nolan was on TalkSport yesterday, and he was particularly talking about Jim White. Not Jim White. What's his name? Yeah, Jim White. Sorry, he brought up the Antonio conversation podcast when he's talking about Scamacca. So Jim White particularly asked Nolan about Scamacca, and Nolan said he's fantastic in training. He gives it his all. He said apparently the coaching staff like what they see. They did say that he's had a few injuries, a few setbacks, but they also alluded to the fact that coming over to England at such a young age on his own, they said that he's found that part of it all quite difficult. They said that back in Italy, he lived very close to family and that, and is very family orientated, as we would imagine most Italians seem to be. So Nolan put a lot of it down to that. I'm not so sure, because I think that with the camaraderie around that West Ham squad, i.e. people like Noble, Rice, etc., Ogbonna, obviously being the Italian, they could have made him feel more included. I'm not saying they haven't, but I'm sure they would have welcomed him and tried to make things easy for him. So I think, yeah, I get what you're saying, Nick, but that comes from Moyes. But I'm talking about in terms of feeling part of the team, part of the squad. You know, you've got people like Ogbonna, been there, been at West Ham for years, Italian speaking, family man. You've got Noble, Rice, new signings like Aguerd. You know, look, we saw the unity, or the seemingly unity after the win, and the fact that Scamacca was there did fill me with a little bit of hope. And I know, like you and Gary said, well, he's not going to not turn up to get his medal, but he didn't have to be there, Nick. I think he wants to be there, but I think it's easy for us to give up on him. Maybe Moyes thinks that, maybe this is Moyes' own admission that he can't change the way he plays, so Scamacca's useless to him. I don't know.
I think, personally, the stories that we heard were true, and this kind of backs all of that up, and that was that Scamacca doesn't want to play with David Moyes. He doesn't want to play in his system. He doesn't feel like he's going to flourish in his system, and he's been biding his time to see what happens with the manager. And now the club are sticking with Moyes That's it. That's it. That's game over. So I think it's as simple as that. I don't think it's a club. I think it was a system and the manager, and I don't think that he feels that his career is going to go anywhere playing for David Moyes. And he obviously wants to. It's a short career. He's 24. Every year you want to progress, and he's been held back last year. You know, he didn't progress. I know he had injuries, but we didn't once try to play in a way that made him look good. We just tried to get him to step in and imitate Antonio every time. You know, we never changed the system once, which is frustrating. And I think it's as simple as that. I think if Moyes had have gone, Scamacca would have stayed 100%. He would have, and I don't think that's going to be the last one. I think we're going to be seeing a few players go. This talk of Ben Rama going, because apparently that's nailed on. Do you think that's because we want to sell Ben Rama? I don't think it is. Fornals as well. It's rumoured that he wants to go. There's going to be an awful lot. There's going to be a bigger rebuild as a result of us keeping David Moyes than what there would have been if we'd have just done the right thing and David Moyes would have done the right thing. But that's not going to happen. He's going to stick around, which means that he's going to have to build a new circle of players that trust him and get rid of all of the players that he's pissed off over the last year. And I don't take too much from the euphoria of the final, John. I think that would have happened anyway. You know, that was for the players, that was for the fans. It was one big party. I genuinely don't take anything from that about the togetherness and everything else. I think they are together with the club. They love the club. I do believe that, those players. How could you not? Look at our fans. So that was, you know, they ran over to the fans, didn't they? They didn't run over to David Moyes. They had a massive party with the fans. I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I know you're saying he'd been held back, but he did have a lot of injuries, and you know, there were moments in games where he just looked unplayable at times, and I thought he had a fantastic touch. He built like a brick shit house. I just think as an ownership, I really think the owners should go, no, hang on a minute, Moyes, you need to fucking find a way to incorporate him into this team. You need to play to his strengths, because we can't keep doing this, and this has happened long before Moyes. I mean, we don't have a striker, ever have a decent striker. It's always the same, and when we do get supposedly bigger names, we don't get the best out of them. You know, Arnautovic, Moyes got the best out of him for a little spell. Haller, I know you're going to blame Moyes, but there's been loads before. Look at the shit we've had up front. It's just so frustrating. So frustrating. I mean, to me, if they send him out on loan, that's as good as selling him, because once he gets the taste of playing back in Italy, he ain't going to want to come back here, is he? That's going to even be more of a nail in the coffin. So if you're going to loan him, you might as well sell him. Not that I want to do either, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there's no smoke without fire with Scamacca, is the way I see it. I think there are far too many people in the media talking about him wanting to leave. He wants to go home. Now, whether that's, as John says, homesickness, it could be. But I think it's more likely to be the style of play and the fact that his career hasn't progressed. Because, look, he came over to England, he made that choice. He never looks really unhappy around the place. I mean, you know, the final is obviously an exception, but he looked delighted last week in that final, and he tweeted something really nice about the club afterwards. So I don't think it's an issue that he's got with the club. I think it is either a personal issue in one of two ways. It's a personal issue with him being homesick, or it's a personal issue because his talent is not being showcased in the David Moyes system. I think, Nick, what you said about sitting him down, putting your arm around him and saying, I will, this season, this is your time, we will play to your strengths and everything. Yeah, that's the right thing to do. I don't see Moyes doing that. I see Moyes likely just flush the problem away and go and find someone else, like a Brozier or whoever, who he knows can play the Antonio role. Because at the end of the day, that's what he went back to last year. And I'm sure he'll be going back to it again once he's had another little flirt with trying to play in a more progressive way. There's only one thing that might rescue this situation, because if we are bringing in a director of football, it needs to happen sooner rather than later. I mean, this week or next week. Bring in director of football. Don't make any decisions on buying or selling, apart from Rice. Don't make any decisions on buying or selling until that director of football lands. Otherwise, you're undermining the guy before he even starts. The director of football should have the choice about whether the system that he envisages David Moyes playing next year, because they're the players that, presumably if he's got all power, the director of football is going to bring in players to suit a system that he's preferred. Obviously, something he'll have to agree with David Moyes, but I don't see someone worth their salt looking at a talent like Scamacca and saying, "Oh yeah, we can afford to let him go, or we can afford to send him out on loan." Really, can we? I don't think we can. Not unless we're offered money over and above what we paid for him.
Yeah, Nick, I know what you're saying about the euphoria of the final, but what I'm trying to say is, you could say they'll always be happy, but Scamacca didn't have to be there. He did not have to be there. Mate, I just want them, like you say, they've got to fucking sit him down and say, look, I am going to change. They've got to give it one last shot, mate. It's fucking ridiculous, especially with the situation we're in. Antonio's probably going to be gone. If not, he's pretty old now, as I said. Mavamba's a kid, and I know everyone goes throw him in, but that's a big responsibility, especially at his age. I'm not saying don't use him in the team, of course not, but not to start and be our figurehead. I don't think, I might be wrong, I'll probably get shot down in flames, but I don't think he's ready yet.
What I'm saying is his price ain't deteriorated. This is not a deteriorated asset that we've got here, right? We should not be offering a loan or a cut price deal.
No, a director of football or a technical director, whatever he's going to be called, it's the same thing. That will completely change the dynamic of the way that things are done, because David Moyes will be working for the director of football. He will have ultimate responsibility for the success of this club, for the success of players that are brought in. He'll be keeping a close eye on everything. He ain't just a head scout. He'll want to see that players are being developed, because one of his biggest attributes is making players better. This guy, this director of football that we've been talking about anyway. He bought like 20 players, amazing players, and his net spend at the end of it was 30 million. He buys and he sells. You don't do that if you buy players in and make them worse. Therefore, if he's going to be judged by players that he signs and everything else and the success of them, he'll be keeping a close eye on training and the way that the team is being deployed and stuff like that. And if he's bringing players in and that manager is not doing the best to make the most of the players that he's bringing in and the squad, then I'm sorry, Moyes' head will roll. He will get rid of him. It won't be down to Sullivan, because they need to give this guy power. They need to give him ultimate power. They've got a football specialist coming in. Let them run the club and let them make the decisions. Don't do it on sentiment. Do it on, do it the right way. And that will change things. And I think you're right. They can't make any fucking decisions on selling players, with the exception of Rice, who it looks like he wants to go anyway. So that's absolutely right. But players like Scamacca going out on loan, fuck off. No, bring this guy in. Let him have a little look around the club and the way that things are run, and try and establish why we just depreciate players for fun, and fix that. And we know what that is, what that problem is. And, get him to sit down with these players as well and say, look, because that's the thing. He's coming with a massive reputation. Apparently, he's got a great personality, a really powerful personality. And he will be able to reassure the players. He will, because you've got a guy there that it's seemingly he won't let players fail. He takes it personally.
So I'm playing you at double speed. I'm getting through these messages really, really bloody quickly. Sounds funny, though. If he does the proper director of football thing, and I don't think he cannot do the proper director of football thing if he's going to get in a proper director of football, right? No director of football worth their salt is going to come in and be subservient to David Moyes. Another part of this equation is, I believe, based on his body language and his words at the end of last season, I believe David Moyes is completely subservient to David Sullivan. He believes that he owes David Sullivan for everything, for keeping him on, for allowing him to keep his job, for allowing him to win a cup. I believe that he believes David Sullivan made that all happen for him. I also believe David Sullivan thinks that he made that all happen for Moyes. So I think the power shift there is not that this is a cup-winning manager who suddenly got a load of clout. I think Sullivan's clout has grown, right? And I think maybe even Moyes' one has diminished because he's thankful for what's happened, right? So, and I had this theory even before the end of the season, based on this dynamic between them two, this ever-increasing Sullivan power. I had this theory that David Moyes would agree to literally anything that David Sullivan says. And I still think that, especially in the last knock-ins, the last year of his contract.
And also, there is because there's a lot of movement really, really early on in this window in terms of players that are looking to be going out, and David Moyes wants to clear the decks. Now, that could be because David Moyes realises that the issues that he's had, and he doesn't want a situation whereby when a new technical director come in, a new boss, the players have got somebody else that they can go to with stories of the past, with this and with that. He doesn't want that. So it might be that he's looking to remove players that potentially not stab him in the back, but tell the truth. So it could be that as well. I think we need to get this guy in place fucking ASAP. What sort of effect that's going to have on the team next season, I don't know, because if we do keep disgruntled players and we've got David Moyes and you've got a technical director of football, then there's probably going to be a game being played for the first 3 to 6 months where these players realise that there's light at the end of the tunnel. So I don't know. Look, it's really weird. I mean, it's all speculation, but it's just strange what's going on at the club at the minute. They've got to get that guy. The first thing they've got to do is get a director of football in charge. Give him the massive pot to work with.
Yeah, we need to move quick. We can't keep dragging our fucking feet. It's infuriating. Just seen the fixtures. We'll start with Bournemouth away, then Chelsea at home, and then Brighton away. So 2 visits to the south coast. Let's hope we have all our players ready, willing and able, and Scamacca's starting.
For me, Scamacca will go because David Moyes has admitted it was a mistake signing him. He can't fit him into his system. Moyes ain't going to change. Yep, director of football needs to be in sooner rather than later. I think that'd be a good move. Not too sure if it's going to happen now, though. That's my feeling anyway. And reference fixtures, one for you, Nick. It's those last 5 fixtures. What we got: Crystal Palace away, Liverpool, Man City, Chelsea and Luton. Well, if we're in a relegation battle come the end of April, we're in the cart with those fixtures, that's for sure.
That's a tough start to the season, isn't it? So, yeah, Bournemouth is usually a horrible place to go. It was very, very easy, a bit too easy last time. But then again, Gary O'Neill will still be there. Gary O'Neill clearly likes to give West Ham an easy time when he plays against us. So I reckon we could probably get a result there. Home to Chelsea. It's anyone's guess what Chelsea's going to turn up next year. But assuming they're going to be a good team, that's going to be a tough game. But first home game of the season, home to Chelsea. We've got a decent record at home to Chelsea. And then perhaps, maybe, you never know, could be about time we started competing with Brighton. That'd be, you know, Brighton and Brentford. They would be my 2 primary targets for this season. Let's try and get some points out of those fuckers.
Oh, for fuck's sake, Doddsy, you've already put us in relegation trouble for next season. What's wrong with you, son? And you're going to go to like 60 plus games again, and you're already looking forward to relegation. PMA, Doddsy. Pasty mental attitude. Sorry, positive mental attitude.
The clue, young John, was in the word if. If we're in relegation problems. That's what I said. I'm going to go to, a bit less than 61 this year, maybe 58. Already booked for Rennes and already booked for Boreham Wood. Yes. So we'll be staying up, mate, and we'll win the Europa League. So I'm quite happy with that.
Already booked the Boreham Wood? Bloody hell.
Yeah, I don't know, mate. I think that's a horrible start to the season, I've got to be honest. But then again, it's the Premier League, isn't it? What would be a nice start? Look at it that way. You know, what fixtures would you choose, really? Every team that survived last season is going to strengthen. They're going to improve. So I don't think that, you know, I think Nottingham Forest will be a better team this year. Bournemouth will be a better team again. I think the only team that are probably going to be a little bit worse and weaker are going to be us off the back of Rice, and that's unless we can really sufficiently replace him. But even then, we've got to think about the transition, guys. You know, the dreaded transition. There's going to be a problem there. We're not going to do our business early. The business is going to be done late. I doubt we're going to have any pre-season again with the new players, same as last season, which is why we struggled at the start. We've got that silly fucking Australian tour as well. Yeah, I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see how it pans out. But I'm not confident in any way for next season. I'm not saying we're going to get relegated. I'm not. But you just don't know. These things can just cascade, as we found last year. If you don't start quick, you're in trouble, really. Especially when you've got European football. You've got to get those points on the board early doors. You've got to. I don't want another relegation battle. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little natter. Before we move on to our dream team conversation, which is that's quite an interesting one. It's really upbeat actually. I enjoyed that. So stick around for that. Before we move on, not something we do usually, but I've got a friend who's doing something for charity at the moment. He's doing it for the Rainbow Trust, and it's 72 holes, 4 rounds of golf at Lingfield Park Resort Golf Club. He's doing it tomorrow, and he's just trying to raise money for an amazing cause for Rainbow Trust. I think he's halfway to his target. He's putting his target about 2K, but I think he's got to raise about £1,000 for it. But the reason he's doing it is because it's a cause that means a lot to him. Like I say, he's a very, very good friend. I work with him, and just to give you a bit of background on the Rainbow Trust, they support families who have got a child with a life-threatening or terminal illness. When a child has a serious illness, family life is turned upside down and time becomes more precious than ever. Rainbow Trust pairs each family with an expert family support worker who enables them to make the most of time together, giving them practical and emotional support whenever they needed it for as long as needed. Now, if obviously, I'm going to put the link in the description if you do want to donate, and there's a video on there that shows you all the amazing work that the Rainbow Trust do. Don't do what I did, and I'll tell you what, I watched it and I was blubbing like a little baby I was. But yeah, it's an amazing call. So look, if you can spare a few quid, please head over there and bung the Rainbow Trust a few quid. It's an official thing. It's not going to a PayPal or anything like that. It's literally it's a crowdfunder on the Rainbow Trust site. All right. So now, anyway, over to our dream team. This is another WhatsApp chat. So I hope you enjoy this one. Right, there we go.
This is Lanzini's team, the one that he chose with Ginge in that YouTube interview, and I think it's just an amazing team from every perspective, from defence, from midfield, from attack. I mean, Bowen on one side, Payet on the other, and Arnie in the middle up front is obscene. Just imagine the amount of goals they would score, and imagine what the defenders would be thinking when they see that front line, let alone when they see the line behind them. With Lanzini at the peak of his powers before his injury, Paqueta at his peak. I mean, my God, and Rice at his peak. I mean, I think a lot of teams would give up before the game even started, I've got to be honest. I think that team, that's before I talk about defence, which is a quality defence. So, but I ain't even going to touch about that because it's the rest of the team that really turns me on. I think that team would easily win the Europa League, and I think it would finish in Champions League places. I couldn't say it'd win the Premier League because Man City are so damn good, right? But I'll tell you what, if that team had been able to compete in that season when we played at the last season at the Bowling, when it was when the big teams were relatively weak, that team would have a chance of winning the Premier League without a shadow of a doubt. But that team has got to have a manager in charge of it that lets those players play to the extent of their ability, right? So you couldn't have that team managed by David Moyes. You could have that team for one season only managed by Bilic. Because as we know, he only lasts one season.
Yeah, it's based on that. It's inspired from that video. It's the same with the exception of the centre-back. So I've gone for Ogbonna to partner Zuma. And I've gone for Soufal at right back. His back three was completely different. He had Zabaleta at right back. He had Aguer and Ginge as his back three. And he was torn between Cresswell and Emerson. Now, it was Bradley Ainbridge. I put this on the Facebook group. And he's made me think about this, actually. And he said, with the supply that you would be getting from the likes of Cresswell, Payet, and he mentioned Bowen, he said maybe Arnautovic wouldn't be the best option up front because of the amount of supply that's going to be coming into the box, and Arnie wasn't necessarily the best in the air for crosses into the box. So he said Antonio, but my argument with that is that Arnautovic is far superior, offers us something completely different, would be wonderful in that. Could you imagine Paqueta passing through the lines and Arnautovic running in behind? Same with Lanzini, and I think the only change that I would make because I was torn between Bowen and Antonio, peak Antonio. If you remember, Payet whipping those balls in with Antonio making that trademark late run into the box. On reflection, I'm not sure. I think peak Antonio in that position with Payet, I probably would, as great as Bowen is, I don't know, I think I probably would go for Antonio now. Now I'm looking at it. Oh, 100%. We would have a chance of winning the Premier League. I mean, Leicester won it that year. And look, make no bones about it. If we hadn't have lost Payet for the period of time that we lost him, we'd have got top four that season. We would definitely have got top four that season. I know there were a couple of games, a handful of games that didn't come to fruition, but every team gets those. Every team that are challenging for the title gets those games. Do you think Man City fans are going to look back at Brentford where they lost twice against Brentford and moan? And of course they're not. In that season, if we'd have had, even if we'd have just kept Payet that season, we would have got top four. But if you sprinkle all of this into the mix as well, we would have topped Leicester, 100%. And that season, with the good feel around the club, and those players, Bilic was definitely the type of manager that in that time, I think it looked like he got his team to go out there and enjoy themselves, and these players would have thrived off of that. They would have. We know that Bilic wasn't a manager for the long term, but to have Bilic in the peak of his powers with this group of players in the peak of their powers, I think would have been in for such a treat for that season. It would have been amazing. But who would you go for though, out of Bowen and Antonio, based on that new rationale from Bradley?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Bilic for one season is just the best manager ever for this type of team, and he proved that. To be fair, because he gave that team so much freedom at Upton Park in that last season, and without that, you can imagine a Payet coming in, he wouldn't get the same freedom under a Moyes or an Allardyce or anything like that. Interesting comparison with right wingers between Bowen and Antonio, and I've got to say, I think on balance they're totally different players. I like them both. I love them both. But I think as a right winger, I think Bowen is the better player. He's the better player. He scores a hell of a lot of goals as well from that side. He makes a lot of goals as well. He's a constant pain in the arse. So when you're talking about Bowen at his peak versus Antonio at his peak, it's a close run thing, I've got to be honest, but two entirely different players. But the player that I prefer personally is Bowen at his peak. I think Antonio has really helped us out in the last couple of years since he's been converted to a striker, because he's solved a massive problem for David Moyes. I think before the sort of striker days, he was on and off, wasn't he? He was sometimes on the right wing, sometimes playing right back. He didn't have the right attitude, so when he was played at right back, he was sulking. And I don't think you'll ever have that kind of problem with Bowen. He's far too humble. And if you told Bowen he's playing right back or wing back, he would just do it. I'm convinced of that. So, and I also think that Bowen holds himself to really high standards. And if you listen to him talk, he knows he had a bad first half of the season. It wasn't up to scratch. But he's recovered and he's come through. But when you look at last season and that European campaign, and what he did to Liverpool, he tore Liverpool apart at our place. Bowen is capable of winning games on his own. Also, let's not forget, it was Bilic that chose Payet. He said, go get him. Nobody else wanted him.
I mean, literally, the only difference was between us and Leicester that year was Leicester went through the entire 38 games of that Premier League season with the same 11 players. I don't think they got any injuries at all at any point. So they had consistency throughout the whole bloody season. And also their two centre-backs at the time were getting away with murder. I can't think of their names now, but they were bullying people in the box, which nowadays they wouldn't have been getting away with. They'd have been on yellow cards, red cards and bans. They were literally manhandling people, professional fouls all over the place, and they were getting away with it. I think we were the better footballing team that year. I know they had Mahrez, who was on fire. He was. But for me, Payet was the best player that season. He was. The only reason that Mahrez got Player of the Year was because they won the league. If it had been the other way round, Payet's showreel from that season You know, I've watched it, and it isn't. You know, like when you watch some show reels on YouTube, and they repeat the same thing over and over again. Well, this wasn't. This is all unique stuff, and it's about 5 minutes long. It's ridiculous. It's like a lifetime of highlights from one season. I think it was ridiculous that he didn't get Player of the Year that year. And yeah, you're right. Bilic did select him. It was a wonderful season, and it was such a shame that he got injured, because we would have. I'm certain of it. We would definitely have got top four and maybe challenged Leicester had we not got any injuries that year. But we did. So
Yeah, Payet landed from outer space, really, didn't he? The kind of stuff that he was doing that season, everyone knew he was the best player in the league. He was the best player in the league by quite some distance. He was so arrogant. He was so arrogant. He knew he was the best player on the pitch whenever he stepped on, and everyone else knew it as well. And listen, when a manager wins a league, they're not expected to. When a player of that team wins a league, when they're not expected to, then they get the top honours, they get the award. But bit of a fallacy, really, wasn't it? A bit silly that when you look at what was it Mahrez, when you look at what Mahrez did, which was very good, and compare that to what Payet did individually, they don't compare. Mahrez was part of a machine that, you're right, had no injuries, and I don't think they went very far in cups either, and I don't think they had any Europe. So they had no distractions. It was purely the league. And I think when they, let's not take anything away from it, though. An amazing feat. But I don't think the big teams, I think the big teams that year woke up and realised they're never going to let that shit happen again. I doubt it ever will.
Yeah, for me, a bit of a weird one, but we're talking about players and their pomp. So I like the whole setup and every player in there. I just, with Arnautovic, I think the supply into him, wouldn't work. Now for me, putting those balls in his pomp, and it's a weird one, Andy Carroll, because when Andy Carroll was on his A game, he was unplayable, just unplayable. So yeah, if you're talking about players at their peak, I would swap Arnautovic for Andy Carroll. That's what I would do. But there's no reason why Antonio couldn't do it when he's on his pomp, but he's too hit and miss for me. That's the trouble.
fuck me, Dodgy. That is a very good shout. That is a really good shout. Jesus. Yeah, you're probably right. I think looking at it, like I say, Bradley Ambridge, or Ambridge, I can't remember how you pronounce his surname now. He suggested that. He said, when you look at that team and the supply that's going to be coming into that box, from central areas and from wide areas as well. The only thing is, because of the only argument that you've got there, Dodsey, is Carroll isn't a player to run in behind. So when you look at the likes of Paqueta and Lanzini, who will pass balls centrally from deep through the lines, Paqueta passes through the lines. So you do need players that can run in behind. So I suppose you've got to weigh it up. Yeah, you've got the wide players in Bowen and Payet that could potentially do that. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. And when you think about it, with Payet as well, Payet did whip lovely balls in, but he chopped inside an awful lot as well. He was an inverted winger, wasn't he? So as is Bowen on the other side. So I'm not sure with that setup. I'm sort of talking myself into it and then out of it again. I think Arnautovic was outstanding. I don't think there's a better player running in behind or running at defenders. Antonio runs him close, I've got to be honest. Peak Antonio. But I like that. I like that with Carroll. I didn't think about that. And somebody else had just mentioned Lingard as well. Peak Lingard. Would Lingard have a place in that team?
I think it's a great call because it adds another dimension to that team that doesn't kind of exist, because Arnautovic, you couldn't say he was good in the air, could you? I don't really remember him using his head that much. I remember him more with his feet. Carroll could do both. You're right what you say about balls in behind, Nick, but there's enough quality there in Payet and Bowen to score more than enough goals and latch onto those balls as needed. But the other dimension of, if you want to put a cross in, who better? I mean, literally, there is nobody better than Andy Carroll at his peak in the air. And actually, he weren't that bad on the floor either, was he? So yeah, I think that's a great call. I think you might have won me over with that one, Dodsey.
let's face it, I think Andy Carroll, a fit and firing Andy Carroll, is quite possibly the best striker that we've seen at the club for quite some time, probably since Dean Ashton. He's a complete number 9. The only thing is with Andy Carroll, you get all the other issues with him as well, you know, hangovers and injuries. But yeah, if you could have him at his peak, at his pomp for a season, then yeah, you are probably right, mate. I don't think there would have been a better number 9. I think he would have possibly been England's number 9 as well, if he wasn't such a bloody idiot.
Yeah, but we're talking about players at their peak, and I think, you know, Dean Ashton would be an upgrade on all of them. Let's be honest, he was the perfect player. But let's not underestimate, you know, Andy Carroll got a big money move to Liverpool, and he was considered a great player, and he was when it came to us, wasn't he?
Does Peak Lingard have a place in that team? Somebody on the Facebook group has just suggested Lingard. They said him in place of Lanzini, but I'm not having that. Lanzini's going this season. It's what's inspired me to do this. And plus, I feel like Lanzini's more of a complete central midfielder. I think you need that. Lingard, he runs from deep. I'm not sure you kind of need that when you've got all of that attacking threat in front of you. Although he is a great player, I don't know. What do you reckon? Do you think Lingard's got a place in there? Peak Lingard. He was a bit of a beast, wasn't he?
Look at it this way. Who's going to lose their place for Lingard? Payet? No, he doesn't. He doesn't get anywhere near that team. That is an elite team. Lingard was a good player who came in when we were shit. And so he was a class above, and he was the missing piece for that particular team. But as we saw with Man U, who have often had an elite team, Lingard doesn't become a part of that. Oh, sorry, you said him or Lanzini. Well, Lanzini, in his pomp, as in before he got injured, it's Lanzini all day long. Infinitely better player. Fucking class he was when he came to us before that injury. Absolute class. Regular for the Argentinian international team. Had a great relationship with Messi. This is a top player that we had. We probably wouldn't have him now had he not got injured. He was a top player. Anyway, even after that injury, I'd say at his best, he was better than Lingard. Perhaps it's just that I hate Lingard a lot. Now, I know Jesse Lingard has won an FA Cup before, and I think he scored the winner in the final. And so that would have been a high point. But you expect to win cups with Man United. You know, you've got all the resources, and you're playing in amongst a team of superstars. Even when they're bad, they're good. So I don't really read too much into him winning an FA Cup. So push that aside, I honestly think the best 6 months of Jesse Lingard's career was when he was playing for us. What do you think?
Yeah, the 6 months Jesse Lingard came back to us was just phenomenal. He just linked the play up, and he was a team player as well for some reason, which he doesn't seem to be anymore or before. But when he came to us, he seemed to just gel. Looking back at that team though as well, guys, could you imagine? And I know this isn't in the team. Lanzini, Paqueta, Payet, and Benrahma all linking up. Could you imagine the triangle one-touch football? Honestly, that would be like dream team stuff, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think Benrahma could come on from the bench when we wanted a bit of entertainment, when we're 4-0 up against, Norwich or something like that. I don't think he'd make it into this first team, and I think that would be very, very entertaining. Yeah, can't get near the first team, though. He'd go on the bench with Lingard and Noble.
So that's a good point, Gary, as well. We haven't thought about on the bench. So I think you're right. We've got Lingard on the bench now, which we believe. I'm not too sure Noble would get on the bench, would he? I don't know. Benrahma would. He really, when he does stuff, him and Paqueta just read each other so well, don't they? What about Fornells? Only joking, lads. Only joking.
The reason Jesse Lingard was so good for us was because he wanted to get into the England squad. Once that came and went, after that, he seemed to lose everything. I think going back to Man United for him after our loan period was a massive mistake. He was obviously promised more game time, which he didn't achieve. Lingard seems to be one of them players who can pick it up and put it down as and when they want. But I agree, the time that Lingard was at West Ham was probably the best of his career. So we were lucky in that aspect, or it was a shrewd signing, whatever you want to call it. But 100%. I like the team you picked, Nick. Yeah, good team, fantastic team. But what you notice about West Ham is that we always have players who fall in and out of consistency. You very rarely at West Ham get a consistently performing player. I'd say Rice, probably, which is why he's so good, which is why he's so sought after, is Mr. Consistent for us in my time supporting West Ham, really. If I go back, there's players back in the day like Julian Dixon, that consistent performers. But in recent times, we've had players that come in, they're fantastic for one season, then they fall off then they go off the boil. You know, there's so many players that we've had that you think, yeah, this could be the start of something, and then they sort of, you know, then they disappear. I mean, look at the Afrosako, look at Enna Valencia. When they come in, I thought, we've got something good here. Arnautovic came in, you know, big name, bit of money, was terrible. Moyes got the best out of him for a little while, then he jumped ship to China. Andy Carroll, injuries. Dean Ashton, injury ruined his career. You know, we've had so much bad luck, stroke inconsistencies, and it's so frustrating as a West Ham fan. We always seem to get starting and then something happens. And I know it's indicative of football, you could say, and maybe as a West Ham fan I'm taking it personally, but I do genuinely believe we have a lot of bad luck with injuries and consistency. I really, really do. You know, Pyatt had to go because of family matters. We know what happened there. You know, there's always something.
Oh yeah, you are right, mate. I mean, there's no way that you'd get every one of those players playing at 100% every game. I think the only player really like Rice in terms of their performance levels and consistency, the only one that measures up to Rice for that is Scott Parker. He never had a bad game, did he? So he's another one. But yeah, no. I mean, like I say, it's just a fantasy, really. It's just a thought of how good we were in that 15-16 season. If you could sprinkle these additional players in there as well, all at their peak, all playing at full pelt for 38 games, you know, which is what happened with Leicester. Leicester did have a season like that. Like I say, they had 11 players. I'm sure they didn't get any injuries, did they? And who was their centre-backs, John? It was Wes Morgan and another one. Dirty pair of bastards. They kept on... They earned a couple of bans, but they weren't getting booked or anything. They was getting away with murder. But if we were to have had that scenario where we had our best 11, or, you know, if we had like 14, 15 players that we could use of that ilk that performed at the highest level for a full season, that they're going to challenge anyone. It would just be amazing. And the entertainment levels would be off the charts. I mean, they were anyway that season, weren't they? Really, with just kind of Pyatt making everyone else better. It was Pyatt and Lanzini, really, wasn't it? But everyone looked good that season, didn't they? Noble probably had his best season as well. Antonio was really good as well. Yeah, it was wonderful to watch. But yeah, I do think that team, like I say, which is mostly what Lanzini picked in his little video, would just be outstanding. It would be unbelievable.
Yeah, they had Wes Morgan and Robert Hoof, the most throwback of centre-backs you'll ever find. Obviously, that was before VAR, wasn't it? So yeah, if they was playing with VAR, they would have given away a lot more penalties than they were penalised for. But you know, that was a strange season anyway, because a lot of the top teams were off. Leicester were lucky with injuries, like you say. But you know, interestingly, with that season was, you know, Leicester went through the season with a ridiculously low possession stats. So they were very pragmatic, but when they had the opportunities to counter and score, they did so more often than not. So yeah, their possession stats were something ridiculous, like 40% average a game or something. I just looked it up. Their average possession stats in that Premier League winning season was 42.4%. 42.4%. That is pragmatic in essence. But the difference is, they were let off the leash when it came to the counter-attack. You know, I just remember them being phenomenal on the counter-attack. Vardy, Mahrez, Kante, to name but a few. But I mean, you know, we average that percentage now this season under Moyes, probably less than, I don't know, maybe similar anyway, but we definitely don't have the same counter-attacking flair.
Yeah, their pace was phenomenal, wasn't it, on the counter? And they were they caused teams damage, a lot of damage. No more than we did with that period with Lingard, though. We were excellent on the counter as well. Yeah, and you're right what you said about VAR. They would have they they wouldn't have won the league if VAR was there. They were filth at the back. And by that period with Lingard, I mean, like, there was like a really sweet 3 months or so where we were just untouchable. Whoever we played just couldn't control us. Towards the end of the season, teams started to get to grips with us, if you remember.
Right, so come on then, let's wrap this one up, and then what I'll do is we'll put this one out for everyone. So, based on this team that we've just spoken about, just visualise that we're in the same competitions now. I mean, we can transport it back to 15, 16, whatever, but let's just say we're in the Europa League, right? We're in the Europa League. It's the same Premier League season as well, so you've got a chance of winning it. So let's visualise we're in that season where Leicester dominate and they win the league, right? We're in Europa League. Say this year's Europa League. Liverpool are in it. Brighton are in it. We've got that team. How do you think we would do? How far would you expect us to go, both in the league, in the domestic cups, and in the Europa League? So we're playing the league in 15-16, and we're playing this year's Europa League and domestic cups, just to make it a little bit more complicated. So playing in 15-16 means there's no VAR, no VAR.
Well, how far we get with that team, I suppose, depends who the manager is. But I mean, if you go back to 2015-16, because of the fall from grace with a lot of the big sides, which enabled Leicester to win it to some extent, yeah, we could be pushing if we were consistent, of course. A lot of flair there, a lot of goals there. So yeah, a lot of creativity. Of course, we'd push for the league there in that particular season because a lot of the big boys fell away. But you know, if you went by this season, Premier League, you know, maybe top 6 for that team, in my opinion. We will be challenging this season with City and that. So top 6. Europa League, yeah. Again, with a team like that, technically, you know, they could play every game like it was a cup game with that flair. So you'd expect to go far in all the domestic cups and possibly the Europa League as well. So it would be an exciting team. But again, being a West Ham fan, you'd always expect the worst. Sorry to be negative. Sound like Nick, don't I?
I reckon if we were allowed to... so you're talking about 2015-16 season. How would that team do back in that season with Bilic as manager? I think we would win the league. I think we'd beat Leicester. We'd win the league. I don't think even Leicester could handle us, to be honest. We'd tear them apart. And Europa League, when you consider Brighton and I assume you mean with today's Brighton and Liverpool in the Europa League, that team, I think at the moment you're talking about Liverpool as in last season's Liverpool, really, aren't you? You don't know really what their new signings are going to do. You don't know what Brighton's new signings are going to do or how they're going to take to Europe. So with all those uncertainties and looking at that team, I have complete faith in that team. We'd end up doing a double. We'd do Europa League and League. There you go, I said it.
Yeah, I feel the same. I feel the same. I think we would have swept Leicester aside with that team if we'd have been lucky enough to have gone 38 games like Leicester did with our preferred 11 players. All playing, you know, with freedom to the best of their ability, with that much flair and craft, and still at the back. We haven't spoken about that defence. Peak Ogbonna and Zuma. I'm sorry, you ain't beating that. Peak Vladimir Soufal and peak Cresswell. You know, there ain't a better left back than when Cresswell was at his best, especially with the way he used to link up with Payet. It was beautiful down that left-hand side. So I particularly like that side of the pitch with Cresswell, Lanzini and Payet. I think it was... Yeah, that was a great time. I think we'd win the league based on 15-16, and that's with Leicester cheating like they did, which they were cheating, and they was getting away with it, which is why VAR got brought in the end. And with all due respect, I think we would outplay Brighton as well. You know, I think we would. How much of 15-16 was down to Billich's coaching or not, I don't know. But when you've got that much craft in the team, I think sometimes that's almost what some managers do. They're brave enough. When you trust your players and you've got enough in the team, you can tell them to just go out and play. Obviously, you set them up. But I think with a team like that, if you send them out to enjoy themselves, they're going to enjoy themselves. And a lot of teams are going to suffer at the hands of them. I think we would see success in Europa as well, even with the likes of Brighton and Liverpool in there. I think we would. And as John said, the domestic cups, we would definitely win something, 100%. Whether it was a Europa League, a domestic cup, I think we'd win the league based on Leicester winning the league. So that would be done. But I do think we'd win another cup as well, whether it be Europa or the league or FA Cup. I think it would be, yeah. It's just an outstanding team, isn't it? It is. It would be brilliant.
Right, for me, I say going along with all of you because of the team that's there. Yes, I think we would come close to winning the league. I do believe that, and we would win a cup. For me, the team that we're going on about, it's the goals are fun. It's the entertainment. It's the one-touch football. It's all the tricks. It's all the showboating. It's all that stuff that they would produce. And that's from people at the back as well. You know, Creswell and Kufal going forward, you know, interlinking with, you know, Lanzini, Payet and Paqueta. I mean, it's just a team to dream of, isn't it? Just a team. That is playing the West Ham way, hands down. And like I say, whoever you put up front, you know, because we had a bit of a debate about that, but be it Andy Carroll, be it, you know, Antonio, whoever, we would score goals with that team. So we'd get a trophy. We would push for the league, but it's like you say, it's West Ham. We'd fuck it up because that's what we do. But what football we would see.
Defensively, that team with Kufal, Ogbonna, Fabianski in a way, I still think in the Premier League would concede goals as much as we did this season. Going forward, especially with only having Rice sitting in front, going forward, it's going to be, I think, more exciting than what we've definitely seen. Not sure about Lanzini stuck out left. I'd have swapped that for Fornals, to be honest. Lanzini would be better off in the middle, but you've got Rice sitting there on his own. Having Payet and Arnautovic. Could you play them as a two? That would perhaps be a bit more fantastic to see as a front two, have for four. Move Lanzini in the middle, maybe. But it's hard to judge players. And even with, as you say, with Bilic as a manager, I get why you did that. Bilic is definitely more forward thinking than David Moyes is. But then again, perhaps that's why Moyes didn't, why Bilic didn't really achieve some all the way. I will add, I'm driving down to Plymouth. I'll get to do this voice note because I'm stuck on a closed M3, which is lovely.
Right, I hope you enjoyed that. That was much longer than what I thought it was. I mean, that's like 25 minutes, 30-minute conversations that you have, but you don't realise because you have them over the course of a day. But there's some good stuff in there, I think. I hope you enjoyed it. We can't always get together. So throughout the summer, when we can't get together to do a show, you know, we'll do our daily rambles. And if you like that, at least this way, you know, people get to have their say without me butting in and jumping over the top of them whenever I disagree. I hope you enjoy the format anyway. Like I say, it was a long show. I've bookmarked it all so you can go to the different sections that you need to go to anyway. But like I said earlier on before the Scamacca video, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe and drop a like on that video. If you've made it this far, you must have enjoyed it. So yeah, look, that's it from me. We'll see you on the next one. Carry you heads.